Hey, so I just wanted to drop a couple quick notes about my soaking process. I've got this grungy little utility sink here in the corner of my house. It's perfect for this kind of thing. I've already washed and soaked the shell, so I'm just going to do kind of a recreation for you. Basically, I drop a little bit of Dawn in there, and then use your like jet setting if you have one, whatever high pressure, it kind of suds it up. And then you drop all your stuff in there. I did want to mention though that you want to make sure the battery terminal comes out, a little piece of metal. You don't need this sitting in water. You can scrub it and lay it out to dry separately. And that little guy right there, that little thing where my thumb is, you put a little flathead in there and you can push it out because there's a little tiny little pin that keeps it in place, and then you'll be able to remove it. The other thing you need to remove is the RF shield, a little piece of metal that sits right here, and it's generally got 2 to 4 screws right there, and it'll come right out. You just don't want to give water an opportunity to sit in here and seep and rust and do the things that water does. Okay, my last note for you, again, recreation, right? So I've got the shell. You want to drop it in there with all the other stuff. And my last recommendation for you is not to overfill with water and kind of set this one on top, right? So imagine there's a layer of suds right there. I would just kind of lay this down on top of the water and let it float and kind of come down and touch on the bottom of the on the top of the front plate or whatever. The reason being just so the water doesn't get in and soak into the label. You can see here, this is an original Nintendo label, if you can believe it, and it's still looking quite nice. You can see we got all the dirt out, all the grime. I scrub it with an old toothbrush. If there's anything serious on there, you can hit it with like a 3M Scotch pad. You'll take off a little bit of the finish, but it's usually recoverable. I can see I've got a little bit of touch up to do here, but generally this one came out looking really good. Okay, so now back to the installation. Yo, here back for part 2. My cat chose the perfect time to start scratching himself. So I attempted to shoot this before, and my phone ran out of batteries, or not out of battery, out of storage. So had to kind of restart. So here we are. I'll start with laying down the original OEM screen gasket. You want to run your finger along the corners and make sure you're not getting gasket in the way of the screen anywhere. If you are, just pick it up and lay it back down. Doesn't need to be perfect, but it shouldn't obscure the screen at all, right? And I've got a little piece of foam here to kind of prop the front of the shell up a little bit. This is so I can put in the buttons and they don't push back, they don't pop out of the shell. Also, make sure you pop your battery terminal back in and reinstall the RF shield. This is also a good time to apply vinyl to it if you want that look. You can get a little bit of vinyl on the inside and kind of get a little custom thing going on. We're not going to do that with this one. We're going to try and keep it a little more original looking. Other than that, one thing you absolutely must do is you must test the screen. Where did I put that bad boy? We've got our ITA. This is a 40 pin. You connect it black part facing down, and then it's actually really easy because you can just flip it over and go ahead and slot it right in there. You should see almost no gold pins. Just the very tip. Just the tip. Just for a second. There we go. Nice and secure. And then I'm going to hook up my external power supply here. My bench. You don't have to do this. You could partially reinstall and test, but the point is you do want to test before you fully screw this thing in, because there are manufacturing defects. Things happen. This looks like it fires up pretty nicely. I'm obscuring the light here so I can inspect it myself, but basically you look for any black lines or nonsense in the corners. You touch a little touch sensor, make sure that's doing its thing, and then if you push and hold, it should bring up the on-screen display like so. This technically is a solderless kit. You don't have to solder up the points, we're going to, because I find all touch sensors to be kind of finicky. I have had touch sensor installations I've been satisfied with, but for the most part, I generally don't recommend it to most people. So we're gonna have both. We're gonna have both. Funny Playing has gotten a lot better with their touch sensors, but I still prefer button controls, whenever possible. So we're going to go ahead and make the connections here on this side before we get it, into the motherboard, into the shell, just so there's nothing behind this. There's very little risk of damage for me doing it this way. So that's how I'm going to do it. Note, these kits come with a 32 and a 40 pin adapter. Obviously, we've got the 40 pin here. I'm going to make nice big old solder balls for each one of my points. We've got right, left, and select. The T is for a touch sensor in case you want to wire up your own. Generally, what's provided works well enough. You could also wire it up to a separate push button if that's more your speed. That's cool too. You got to drill a hole somewhere though, which is something we want to avoid at the OEM shell. Kind of my goal is to do as little modification to it as possible. Try to keep it as original as possible. Because, for all the modding and all the stuff we do, there's nothing quite like an original Nintendo button setup. They just, they glide. They're effortless, especially after you wash them and they're all nice. OEM buttons are amazing. So I put down solder blobs. These are pre-tinned wires, so they generally kind of glide where they're supposed to go. There we go. I'm not super happy with that, so I'm going to get a little more tin, mainly for the flux, and I'm just going to redo that real quick. Okay. And then the right one is actually going to go to the left side because that's where the shoulder buttons are aligned, and we're going to be tapping into the touch points for those bad boys. Okay. Hopefully I don't look like too much of an idiot doing it this way. All right. Let me just make sure that's centered. There we go. Cool. So now the screen's ready to go in. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You're going to peel the outer layer. Oh, I forgot to mention too, if you're installing in a transparent shell, there's an extra black sticker that you need to apply along the bottom of the screen right here. Okay. But we're not installing in a transparent, so I'm going to align it basically as far right as I can. Letting it sit in that little notch. And we need to move it over just slightly. It's okay. Just kind of massage it in. There you go, sweetheart. Good job. I knew you could do it. Don't be afraid to sweet talk the Game Boy. It helps. I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure here. And looking at the other side, I'm going to reapply my little protector deal. This is just going to save you so much headache later on, as it's going to keep dust and crap off of your nice pristine new screen. And then I'm just going to double check. Oh crap, I forgot a step. I have to take it out. I'm so sorry. There's one more step. Dang it. That's what I get trying to look cool on the internet. I was like, why isn't it going into place? All right, so let's get her out. See, and this is another good reason to reuse your OEM gasket. So you can idiot-proof yourself a little bit. Let's go ahead and get this off. Sorry, folks. I forgot. I'm the dum-dum today. Don't touch the screen no matter what you do. See, look at that. It's already applying itself pretty well. Okay. So here's what I forgot to do, folks. I forgot to clip the little nubs on the screen. So along the top, you see those two little white nubs, and this one right here, those actually need to be clipped off. So let me realign my gasket here. Looks like it lifted off without too much hassle. Cool. This is why you rehearse for online videos, folks. You go through it in your head first. Don't be a dum-dum like me. All right, but we're going to go ahead and snip these guys off. So if you don't do that, it's not going to sit quite right. I mean, you can adjust the alignment in settings, but you want to do this. Trust me. Just a little iota comes off there, but that's all we need. All right. If at first you don't succeed, try again. So now it should sit in my little notch. There we go. That's it. The most important thing is that the top is perfectly flat and aligned. You can adjust the screen up and down, but you can't adjust for tilt, right? So it really is important that it sits in there nice and square. We'll slap our protector back on there. Okay. Now at this point we're ready to drop some buttons in. Go ahead and do that real quick. And again, you know, the reason for loving a mod like this, besides, you know, upcycling a perfectly good Japanese-only shell, is, shit, what was I going to say? I guess that is the reason you're upcycling a nice OEM shell. Oh, right, the button feel. You can reuse the OEM buttons and pads in other shells, but I don't know. Everything just feels right to me when it's an OEM. Oh boy, did that cat run off with my... No, here it is. Okay. Thought my kitten ran off with my start select. Okay. Let's hit it real quick with some ISO. It already went through the wash, but I, you know, have a kitten, have a mischievous kitten. You know, cats have different personalities, but I just don't trust mine, and he's a mischievous little shit. Okay, that's looking good. Great. So now at this point, let me check my camera alignment here. Let's see if I can get everything in frame. At this point, we're ready to start wiring up. Okay, and for me, I like to connect the screen first. You don't have to. I just like doing it here while everything is out. It's just a little bit easier than curling over the ribbon. You do want to be careful with the ribbon. You want to treat it with respect. How I was saying, kind of when you first meet your in-laws. At this point, you can flip the touch sensor over too. That's not going to hurt anything. Okay, and we're going to do kind of a fancy feast install here. Let me make sure I'm in frame. I think I just barely am. You'll forgive me if I'm not, right? And there's two ways to go about this. You can solder to the touchpads themselves, the test points, sorry, which I'm going to do. Or you can solder to only one test pad, because they are kind of small. They are a little bit difficult if you're brand new. Or you can solder directly to the back of the shoulder buttons. That's also perfectly acceptable. Like I said, we're going to use the touch points today. All right. And then this is 100% optional, but I like to thread these guys through the CPU pins for like a little bit of extra pizzazz. So my S, I'll just snake right there through the bottom. Hopefully my hand's not too much in the way. Is that on camera? I've got this camera mount that's kind of difficult to see exactly where everything is. Okay, good. I'm pretty sure it is. Then you can use tweezers, or you can risk it with your big old meat sausage hands like me. Hold her up. Get her soldered down there. And then I like to go over it again. It's perfectly flat. Try to resist the urge to tug on it too much. You give it a little tug, but if you're moving the board, you're probably tugging a little bit too much. And then your right and left go to the respective right and left, and I'm a ding dong. I put them facing. I tried to face the wires in the direction they already needed to go, but of course I had a dyslexic moment and put them the opposite way. So let's see if I can get a little fancy feast here. I think, ooh yeah, I've got enough slack to run that. So we'll go ahead and run right side under select so it's not getting in the way. Come on. Under select and then back over and through this next set of CPU pins, because we are recording ourselves for the internet, so we got to add a little bit of pizzazz to it. And that can generally go, yeah, that's a nice run. Funny Plane gave me a good length this time. Okay, and this one is this one's really difficult to do from this orientation, unless you happen to be ambidextrous, which I am. So we'll show that off on camera and hopefully not fuck it up too much. Apologies again if I'm blocking your view, but this requires my attention and my big fat hands to take over the camera for a minute. There we go. That's very good. You also want to be aware of where the wires are going. Right here is the EXT port, and there's like a big divider here right next to the D-pad that can squish. Like if you've got a wire running over the clock crystal or one of these other components, it might squish your wire, and then you'll run into this awkward situation where sometimes you'll get phantom button presses. When you go to adjust the on-screen display or whatever, it'll act a little wonky, and that's probably because you're shorting somewhere on this. So you want to be very careful of your wire management. You don't have to go, crazy like me, but you generally want to make sure you respect where the big pieces of plastic go and where your pinch points are. And hopefully I'm able to run this through my CPU pins. I'd really like to. There we go. I need something pointier. You don't need to run them through the CPU pins if you don't want to. The CPU is big and scary, admittedly. I totally understand if you want nothing to do with it. There we go. Cool. I'm going to pre-tin a little bit here. All right, layer down. And I'm going to loop this around this way because I want to avoid that screw hole. That's a screw hole right there. Okay. I'm going to touch that up a little bit. I'm not super happy with it. The other thing you shouldn't be ashamed to do is lay down some Captain tape. It's nothing wrong with that at all. It can help keep your wires in place. And I'm just going over it again because I like to see them perfectly over the test point. Okay. So you've got your wiring kind of in place. The wires are decently laid out. You're kind of tucking them over here. You're getting them out of the way. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to lay down a little piece of Captain just because I want this one staying in place. I don't want it running around when I close the shell. Okay. So I'm just going to lay that down right there. Just a quick little seat belt. Keep it in place. Nothing too fancy. And then I could lay another one down here to keep that one in place, but I think we're going to be okay. I am on camera, so we'll go with best practice, Brandon, in rare form. Okay. That's going to be okay. Make sure it's off the pad. Okay. And then just for your reference, this is the little piece of tape that goes down here on the front. If you have a clear shell. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. And then here's the Funny Playing adhesive, which, you know, this is probably great if you have a Funny Playing shell. I would use this if I had a Funny Playing shell, but for OEM, we're going to try and keep it OEM. Now, at this point, you're going to very delicately fold your speaker back over. We're going to fold the motherboard and sandwich it into place. You need to be aware of the shoulders. They need to align and go in this little bracket right here. You need to be aware of the speaker. The speaker needs to tuck under this ribbon right here with its little bracket aligner thing at the bottom, which it naturally wants to do. Okay, but you need to be aware of all those things at once. So flipping it over, the first thing I'm doing is I'm making sure the EXT port is where it's supposed to be. And then generally I run my index and my thumb over the speaker to try and promote it downward so it can kind of scoop under that little ribbon. And that's just falling into place beautifully, minding the touch sensor. Stupid piece of crap that it is. Nice. Okay, and I'm giving it little test wiggles to make sure everything is in place. Looks like the speaker's not quite where it needs to be. You see how my volume and my headphone there are just a little bit out of whack. We're going to get in there with a tweezer. We're going to poke it. We're going to poke it again. Okay, it's not responding to my pokes. So we're going to lift it up a little bit and see what's going on. Why aren't you laying down there, fella? There we go. Okay, he just needed a little extra attention, and that's okay. Everybody needs a little extra attention sometimes. Okay, now let's get the correct bit for our screwdriver, and let's get a couple of the motherboard screws down. Again, counterclockwise. Click. Hear that? And then it just glides in. It's effortless. And you don't need to go all like Hulkman on this, okay? You will win. Okay, the plastic will break. What you want to do is just push gently on the motherboard and see if it moves up and down a lot. If it doesn't, you're good. Click, turn. Okay. Generally, like I'm finger tightening here, like this level of strength, and I'm stopping when I meet resistance. Because you don't need to dig it down. And if you go overly tight, you'll get weird feeling buttons. The buttons they're very sensitive to the tightness. They need to be torqued within spec, so to speak. Now we're not quite done. Okay, you may be thinking it's time for power switch and all that stuff, but we're not quite done. TFTs need to be calibrated, and you calibrate them by turning that little thingy right there. That's a potentiometer. And that is used to adjust the screen flicker. So, hopefully I can do this all on camera. But we're going to wire her back up. Okay. I'm going to get my AGS aging ROM. This is not NES Classics. Fire her up. Hold down the shoulder buttons. Okay, that brings us here. We're going to go to Test, Program. We're going to go to Flicker Adjuster. Hopefully you can see all that. And I'm not paying attention to screen alignment. I'm not caring about any of that right now. I'm going to Flicker Adjust. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a little bit of flutter to the screen. So now I'm going to very carefully grab a small screwdriver, like jeweler's size, stick it in the potentiometer, come back over here, and I'm going to turn. Oops, I activated the touch sensor. Damn thing. Turn it one way or the other. Small baby adjustments. This screwdriver is too small. There we go. Larger screwdriver obtained. Here we go. And as you move left and right, you'll kind of see there's a point where the flickering picks up and where it stops. There's always going to be a small level of flicker to it. Not always, but a lot of the times, the best you'll be able to do is like a small amount of flicker, and that's all right. I'm going to mess with it a little bit more. That's because, as Mako says, that's who I am as a person. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. You can play with it a while until you're happy with it. Now the screen's calibrated. If you don't do that, you may notice the equivalent of like scan lines or something when you do it. Another good thing to do is to pop that bad boy back in and go do your button test here. I've already done that. I know all my buttons work, so we're good to go on that. So let's go ahead and get the final touches in. We'll get our power switch in place. Our left and right. Of course, left goes on the right and right goes on the left. Very good. Little side pieces. Sometimes when you torque these side pieces back in, there's a tiny little baby dick amount of wiggle to them. It's not the end of the world. What you can do though is you get this stuff right here. So this is a magical substance called earthquake putty, and you get just that little baby. Like, see this big old chunk of it? I'd grab like that much, and I'd stick it right here in the hole, or in the groove, and that would prevent it from moving around, or it would prevent that wiggle that can sometimes happen. And at this point, we're ready. Go ahead and slot this guy back on. This is unfortunately an aftermarket battery door, but that's okay. It works all the same. Okay, give it a wiggle test. Look at your top, look at your bottom. You're looking for anything sticking out. What you really don't want to ever do is screw down at an odd angle and have something catch. It's going to ruin your day. And I'm going to start the bottom one. You heard that little click because I turned counterclockwise before beginning to screw down. And then the last little tip I have for you guys is look at your screws. You should have wiped them off a little bit before you went back in here. Here's my click. Sometimes the click is more of like a thunk or a thud. It's very subtle. But you want to use your best condition ones for the most visible holes. It's a really minor touch, but it's something I really look for and appreciate. These are the nice shiny screws there. It looks a little bit better. If you have ones that look kind of crummy, stick them down here in the holes. And you notice I'm going to use an X pattern. So I like to start here just so I don't have to switch bits, because this is the one Phillips head and then the rest of them are the tri-wing. So we're going boom, boom, boom. You could also go here, 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 here. But the point is, whenever you deal with electronics, you want to screw down in kind of an X formation. That's generally best practice. Okay. I see an issue. Oh, nope, there it is. I was going to say I'm missing a screw. And again, when I start to feel resistance, I just stop screwing. I'm not interested in getting it super duper mega tight. You don't need these things under stress. You want to be as gentle as you can be. All right. Okay, we're looking good. I need to find some double A's. But at this point, we're basically done. Like I saw it fire up off the bench. I tested the buttons. I know we're good to go. So this is one complete restoration. There is one last little piece, of course. We will install the glass screen lens, but I already have a video on that. Hey y'all, so here we are on the other side. my footage got corrupted, so I'm just redoing it really quickly with the old hand cam here. So unfortunately, my test cartridge is it is kaput. It just doesn't load anymore on any Game Boy I put it in. But that's kind of what I get. I used one of those like knockoff cartridges. You can see that blob ball chip style in there. So these things are prone to failure. So it's whatever. I've got my EverDrive in here with the ROM loaded. That's another perfectly acceptable way to do it. And you're going to hold down shoulders when you boot it to get to this screen. We're going to go over to test program real quick. And we're going to go to LCD unit checker. And then we'll see the flicker screen again. We'll get pure white, pure black, and then look for those pressure points that I told you about. Don't see any there. And then eventually we get to the bounding box, and that's going to, here's perfectly in front. So you can see I'm within the bounding box, and I want to show you how I got there. I hold down select, I bring up the OSD, I hit select, and with X I can adjust left and right, and with Y I can adjust up and down, and I've maxed out the up adjustment. If I go to the right trigger, you can see it starts going down. Alright, and that's how you get that guy adjusted. Another thing I want to note is I had to take out the touch sensor because it was going haywire. Like I said, they're kind of notorious for going unreliable. So if you have an issue with yours, I'd recommend just snip it off. You saw the on-screen display works perfectly with the buttons, so no problem there. I also forgot to put in the light pipe. It's like this curse where I like have to open a console every single time because of something stupid like that. But yeah, this is all done. It's ready for the next owner, and yeah, looks and sounds great. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial, and I hope it was helpful for you. Oh yeah, one more thing. If for any reason, you can see there's kind of some small specks. They're all on top of this lens. You see like they move when I touch them. If for any reason you need to remove this lens, like you screwed up the lens install, you can bend a 1mm slightly. See how slight that bend is? And you can actually notch it right in there. And now if I torque that, it's gonna bring the lens up without damaging anything. You see here, it's really important you use a wide angle, the wide angle of the entire razor blade, because if you get in here and try to, with like a screwdriver or something, you're going to leave a little notch up there. It's going to look bad. You're going to feel bad. You're going to get fingerprints all over it for the rest of your life. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial series. I hope it was helpful to you. And I hope you save an OEM Game Boy and get to enjoy it in kind of its purest form. Have a good one. Sorry, last thing I promise. Last addendum. If your shell, if you took off some of the finish or whatever when you were scrubbing it, or it looks kind of weird, you can put some UV sealant on it. I've got some UV sealant on this black one here. This is also an OEM project, and it restores a lot of the shine and luster to it. You can see it looks pretty good. So I'd recommend you do that. If you do apply the UV sealant, make sure you wait a couple days before you touch it. It gives it time to soak in, and keep it off the glass. You can put it on the buttons, it's no problem. It's most effective on plastic. Highly recommend it. I'll put a link to what I use in the description. Thanks again.